Hi, everybody. It's Andrew Shikiar, Executive Director and CMO here at FIDO Alliance. Megan, thanks for that intro and for putting together such a great agenda today. So as Megan said, I'm going to kick things off to kind of give you some perspective on where FIDO stands with our core specifications and how we're enabling passwordless sign-ins at scale for consumers and for enterprise alike, with a focus on the financial services industry. So you've seen these slides from me before, probably. We see all sorts of data and statistics about the password imperative, or the imperative to move beyond passwords. The fact of the matter is, financial services has always been a primary target for hackers because that's where the money is. And COVID only accelerated this, right? COVID all of a sudden created a soft attack surface. And so you saw a spike in a growth in attacks during COVID, post-pandemic. And as digital transformation has taken hold, hackers have taken note. And so data points like this, and we have slides and slides of these, by the way, are only growing over time. And the fact of the matter is, we've been talking about the password problem for so long now. I actually feel like we've lost sight of exactly how large of a problem it is. So typically, we'll talk about the great benefits of unphishable FIDO MFA, which certainly is great. But it's important to kind of look at the core problem statement here, right? And the core problem statement remains passwords for a couple of reasons. One, that is the foundation of any sort of authentication scheme. Secondly, MFA adoption has lagged, right? Especially for consumers. And so part of this is lack of will, frankly, by relying parties, but it's mainly, in my opinion, an issue of usability and ease of access to advanced multi-factor authentication capabilities. And so as a result, when our primary factor is passwords, you see data such as this. And what we've seen since then is adding on layers, right? So we've had the same primary factor for close to 60 years now, right? How much 60-year-old technology do you use on a daily basis other than passwords? And so it's well past time for us to find a better primary factor. And so what we've done is kind of layer on what I'll call legacy 2FA systems, right? Things like SMS OTP, other kind of human readable secrets as a form of 2FA. And look, let me be clear, any form of 2FA is better than a password alone. But legacy forms of 2FA really are just band-aids to try and stem the damage from the flawed primary factor. And so it's little wonder that we're seeing damaging MFA bypass attacks that leverage a combination of social engineering and traditional phishing to access enterprise systems and or to take over consumer accounts. Frankly, we saw this coming last year, MFA bypass attacks, and sadly we were correct. And I think we'll see this continue to grow, with enterprise attacks and taking advantage of consumers, with smishing, SMS phishing, really spiking in the US in 2023. And all this comes down to, again, the fundamentally flawed primary factor of passwords. And I think that the common thread of all these bypass attacks is that they layer human-dependent layers on top of a phishable primary factor, right? We need to shift away from this. We need to start with a phishing-resistant primary layer of FIDO authentication. SMS OTPs, right? Why do they fail? They can be SIM swapped, they can be phished. TOTP, they're also human readable and can be social engineered, right? Just ask Twitter or Twilio, for example. Push also can be social engineered, or you think about push fatigue. All these things are dependent on human judgment and take advantage of human error. Whereas FIDO presents a phish-resistant primary factor through passkeys that really puts emphasis on the cryptographic dialogue between a FIDO key pair instead of relying solely on human judgment or error. The fact of the matter is, human beings, right? I believe in that, we're positive people. I believe in the positivity of human nature, but hackers take advantage of that. And we want to help. We want to, when the IT guy calls and asks for your OTP codes, you want to do that because you think you're solving a problem, but you're really just playing into their hands. So we need to move away from relying on human judgment in favor of cryptographic signals and cryptographic decisions made by the algorithms associated with that. So, all that being said, so why FIDO, right? So we talk about the unphishability of FIDO. Yes, so absolutely, FIDO protects your bottom line. When companies that have deployed FIDO see reduced fraud, you see greater greater employee productivity, reduce costs through password resets and things like that. And so this has always been true with FIDO authentication. And frankly, the conversations I've had over the years about deploying FIDO have always started on that side, right? How do I reduce fraud? How do I reduce account takeovers? Yes. Those are all very important things. But more and more, I see companies looking at the top line benefits as well, right? So simple, secure access to enable online product and service consumption. How do I get my users online more quickly with more satisfaction? How do I reduce shopping cart abandonment rates? All these things are also enabled through the greater usability of FIDO authentication versus other forms of 2FA and MFA. If you are a consumer service provider, imagine increasing your sign-in rate by 5% or even just 1%. Relying parties who have deployed FIDO are seeing even stronger results than that. Likewise, if you're an e-commerce vendor, imagine reducing shopping cart abandonment rate by even 10%. Right? Our data shows that 50% of consumers have had to abandon a purchase in the past 6 months because they forgot their password. That's a huge opportunity cost. So FIDO's helping bolster the bottom line and also improve the top line results from online services. And all that being said, we've learned a lot, from our time with FIDO specifications and market. So it's important to note, so FIDO's here in our 10th year of operations. We've had protocols in market for several years, and hundreds of companies have deployed FIDO to billions of consumers. That includes our UAF protocols for native apps, FIDO2 and WebAuthn for web sign-ins. Both have led to outstanding results. In fact, the data I showed on the prior slide was using a combination of UAF and FIDO2. But that being said, we realize as an organization that for FIDO to be adopted at massive scale, at true scale, usability needed to be further enhanced than it was previously. And again, to my point earlier, pretty much every conversation I have about deploying FIDO these days has usability front and center. So with that in mind, last year, FIDO introduced the concept of passkeys. I'm sure you've heard about this. If you haven't, I'm actually shocked. But passkeys are basically a different way of implementing FIDO2 WebAuthn. The fundamental change here is that we allow the private key to be securely synced across a, say, operating system cloud or a secure sync fabric. What this does is ensure that the user's passkey will be readily available on all of their devices. And frankly, it's more commensurate with consumer expectations these days, how they sign into services. Right? If you ask a consumer who's using, say, iCloud Keychain, how do you sign into things? They won't say, I use iCloud Keychain. They'll say, I use Face ID. Or if they're using, Chrome form filter, say, oh yeah, my browser fills it in for me. Those are actually password managers, which provide a pretty seamless sign-in experience for the user. They just have to show up and probably use a biometric to, trigger that dialogue. But on the back end, they're still relying on passwords. All right, so that's the user experience people expect. Why should they have to re-enroll every device to take advantage of FIDO authentication when they expect something more seamless? So Passkeys basically delivers that more seamless user experience, but instead of issuing passwords on the back end, there's a FIDO public key. And Tim Capali and Christian Brand are going to go into much more detail on how Passkeys work. So I'll spare you my overview. Important to note about Passkeys, a couple of very important things. First of all, this is embraced by platforms. We announced this with a fair amount of fanfare last May, jointly with Apple, Google, Microsoft, and FIDO Alliance. Right? It's non-trivial to get these companies to all issue a joint announcement. I think that shows exactly how much they care about FIDO Alliance and how committed they are to this passkey vision for the future. Another important thing to understand about passkeys is that passkey is now a brand. It's a term we use to describe FIDO sign-ins. Right? We were lacking that before. So we talk about usability. One of the biggest challenges in moving consumers to passwordless is retraining their expectations and how you sign into things. And while a lot of companies had implemented WebAuthn for platform authenticators, say on your desktop or your MacBook, for example, everyone explained it slightly differently. Some would say, next time use your thumbprint. Some would say next time use your device unlock. Someone would say, something else. Someone would say use WebAuthn. None of those things were consistently used across consumer audiences. So we firmly believe that by having a common terminology, a common term for any passwordless FIDO sign-in, and also common iconography with the passkey icon, we will start seeing consumers recognizing a common sign-in experience and start seeking out passkey sign-ins moving forward. And to that end, we've actually seen some good adoption. All right, so passkey support went live on Apple platforms in October of last year, on Android and Chrome, December, January this year. So in practice, they've only been on market for less than half a year. We've seen many major brands announce support for passkeys. Notably, PayPal and Docomo announced support with us live at Authenticate back in October. Companies like Shopify and Kayak have gone live with passkey implementations, passkey sign-ins. Yahoo Japan and SK Telecom more recently have announced their own support for passkeys. And this is not comprehensive, but a pretty good indication of some of the earlier adopters who are taking advantage of the synced passkey benefits to allow their consumers to have easier sign-in access. I also highlight 1Password and Dashlane, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But both these companies play such a vital role in our collective move towards a passwordless future. They're also enabling passkey sign-ins to their password manager products, and are also working very closely inside of FIDO Alliance on a third-party ecosystem, which I'll touch on in a few minutes. So all those are consumer examples, right? So some of our savvier attendees today will ask, well, yeah, Andrew, what about the enterprise? The fact of the matter is, device-bound passkeys in forms such as like FIDO security keys or platform authenticators, they've been deployed in enterprise settings for several years, right? If you go to the FIDO Alliance website, you'll see case studies of companies that have rolled out passkeys to hundreds of thousands of employees, where phishing attacks have plummeted, where support costs have gone way down, employee satisfaction and productivity has gone way up. So what we call device-bound passkey, again, is your kind of traditional means of doing things, say with a YubiKey, Titan key, or something like that. Now, that being said, synced keys, the new value proposition here certainly do require different deployment considerations, right? It is a slightly new paradigm for an enterprise to roll out. So a couple, reflections on this, and Megan will be talking about this more later. First of all, passkeys are a very natural fit for like BYOD authentication. Right? We see more and more companies allowing their employees to sign in with apps on their phones, or by using their phone to talk to their laptop. This is becoming more the norm than the exception, and passkeys are just there and are a very natural fit for that environment. That being said, some more complex or more regulated enterprise schemas, may require added proofing signals. Right, so you may want to, if you're worried about the sync key and what that means to your assurance that person is who they say they are, you can add signals on top of this, and FIDO Alliance is issuing guidance on this front in the next couple of months. And as I say, actually, to the last point, to reemphasize that, rest assured, this is a very active area of discussion within the FIDO Alliance, within various working groups. And we will be addressing this both through guidance and also, bear in mind that, FIDO specifications are never set in stone, right? These are living documents, and the trajectory overall, like there's a unified agreement that, this passkey vision is our future for how passwordless is going to take root. And as these edge use cases or other use cases come to the fore, they are being addressed and will be addressed in updates to our specifications and updates in the ways that platforms and other passkey providers support FIDO authentication. So one other point to hit on here, very important. When we first came out with passkeys, we got some pushback, like, okay, this is just outsourcing all of our authentication to big tech. Why should I only trust Apple, Google, and Microsoft? Well, the answer is you probably shouldn't, or you don't need to, at least. You certainly can. But we've always had a vision for a third-party ecosystem, right? So third-party passkey providers are absolutely essential to our vision. They're essential to creating choice. They're essential to creating competition, which will really sharpen the edge for everyone's implementation of FIDO authentication. So again, I mentioned 1Password and Dashlane, also LastPass. Pretty much every password manager is actively participating in the alliance and contemplating how can they, as credential managers, manage not just passwords, but also passkeys. And several companies have announced their intent to do so. We are working inside of FIDO Alliance to ensure that this happens in a very secure and consistent way, right? Very much in the way that you use password managers today across ecosystems, you'll be able to do the same thing with passkeys. So these companies are working hand in glove with the platform providers, and we'll have much more to talk about on this front soon. But the net message here, the top level message is we're absolutely aware of the necessity and working to enable this as rapidly and as securely as possible. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my favorite topic, which is usability. UX is so much of what we do now in FIDO Alliance. We have a thriving UX working group. We have different working groups inside the Alliance. They all are very important, have a lot of activity. But the UX working group is doing so much great work right now. The slide details some of the work we've done on the UX in the past couple of years. We're actively, in fact, we're in the middle of researching the passkey user journey, the passkey user experience, and we will be issuing UX guidelines, our third compendium of UX guidelines on the best way to implement passkeys later on this year. We see FIDO Alliance's role in the industry to create specifications and enable market implementation. And giving UX guidelines and UX guidance is a very important part of that. And we're very grateful for the efforts of those who are taking part in that working group. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much. Megan, if we have time for questions, I'm happy to take any. I think we have around 3 minutes, or 4 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
We do have a little bit of time. Thank you, Andrew. So there are a few questions. I know you touched on this, but there is, the question, a lot of questions around, should we look at passkeys and the synced passkeys now as really a consumer-oriented solution, and other flavors of FIDO, like device-bound passkeys in the enterprise setting, or how do you feel like folks should be looking at the enterprise scenarios today?
Yeah, so there's one flavor of FIDO, right? It's FIDO Authentication. No matter what the protocol is that you're deploying, it has the underlying goodness of asymmetric public key cryptography, which can be, user can verify themselves through a single gesture. So whether that's with a native app or with a synced passkey or with a device-bound passkey, that can be covered in all of those scenarios. Likewise, there's no reason to wait to deploy FIDO until tomorrow, or you should deploy FIDO today using the existing protocols. That being said, there certainly are other considerations in enterprise. Sync passkeys are a very natural fit for all consumer use cases, and I think for most enterprise use cases. You look at some of the data, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but for Azure AD, they're seeing only around a quarter of their customers using MFA, even though it's built into the platform. And so in my view, making MFA more readily accessible at the fingertips of all these employees is a good way to accelerate MFA adoption in the enterprise. And there's nothing stopping an enterprise from also layering added factors, right? So you can do another factor on top of, if needed, or if desired, you can do another factor on top of a passkey. What's significant there is that, passkey is such a stronger, even a synced passkey is such a stronger primary factor than password that you're much better positioned for doing that. And the signal you're getting from a passkey, synced or primary device bound, is incredibly powerful. It's a very strong message from the platform provider or the passkey provider that they're very confident that this person is who they say they are.
Yeah, thank you. And you just said, passkeys as, a foundational, you could put a layer on top of it in certain scenarios. So just to clarify, because this question just came in, which is really this concept of passkeys and synced passkeys particularly meant to deprecate the need for multiple steps? There are certain scenarios, do you agree that a passkey sign-in is adequate and other steps are not going to be needed?
100%.
Great, thank you. And then last question for Andrew, which is the role of physical security keys. Where do you see those fitting into the new sort of world of sync passkeys and device-bound passkeys?
Yeah, security keys, have been and are and will remain the gold standard from a security posture for FIDO authentication. That's why so many enterprises, so many government bodies are deploying them at massive scale with more rollouts to come. So I think, for enterprise settings, there's a very natural fit. For prosumers, it's a very natural fit. It can be a very, security keys can be a great way to back up your passkeys. So they remain a vital part of the FIDO vision for passkeys, and they house what we'll call device-bound passkey, where that is it's not synced, right? So for scenarios where your line party wants to ensure that key is bound to that individual, a security key is an optimal way of doing so.
Thank you. And to the audience, so I do have more questions regarding passkeys. Some of them are fairly technical in nature. I do want to let you know we will, when we have Tim and Christian on later, we'll address some of these questions because I think that their presentation might address them, or if they don't, we'll ask them a few questions in a little bit here. So thank you, Andrew, and please stay tuned. We have a great presentation from Hyper coming up here in just a minute. So see you back here in a moment.
Thanks so much.